Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. Well, this is obviously going to be the subject of an inquiry, but I think it's a matter of great public concern and has been publicly commented upon, and so I'm not going to be the arbiter in any determination of what Mr. Mpofu did or didn't do, and I'm prepared to comment on it. First of all, the decorum of the court, the dignity of the court, requires that counsel act with politeness towards witnesses, towards colleagues, and obey the directions of the presiding officer, which in this case was the Deputy Chief Justice. So telling a colleague to shut up is way outside of the parameters of the manner in which we may address our colleagues. We're not allowed to have our personal feelings enter into the way that we conduct matters. We have to conduct ourselves with dignity and decorum in the court.
And is there any sort of feedback or action that the bar then takes in this particular instance?
Yes, I have obtained confirmation that a complaint has been laid against Mr. Mpofu. That complaint will be investigated by the professional committee of the Johannesburg Bar. That is a subcommittee of the Johannesburg Bar Council. And Mr. Mpofu will obviously be given every opportunity to defend himself. And if it is found that his conduct amounts to unprofessional conduct, then the Johannesburg Bar Council can sanction him.
And who has laid that charge against him?
I don't have the identity of the person who laid the complaint.
Who has the jurisdiction to be able to lay a charge of that nature against him?
Anybody who has knowledge of the facts is entitled to lay a complaint of that nature. It's just a question of bringing it to the attention of the relevant body. And in fact, the Johannesburg Bar Council could have taken note of this in any event because it's in the public domain, and I think would have been under a duty to investigate.
There are some advocates who say, looking at the comments that Advocate Mpofu made in context, that the Deputy Chief Justice did not stop or intervene when Advocate Leroux was interfering when Advocate Mpofu was trying to make his points. Is this type of situation supposed to be looked at within that type of context? In other words, is there an alternate way that the Deputy Chief Justice could have dealt with the situation at the time in that particular room that could have prevented an escalation to the point that we witnessed?
Well, let me first of all make it quite clear that it doesn't matter whether Justice Zondo was right or wrong. He's the chair. He directs the proceedings. There is no excuse for counsel telling a colleague to shut up. There's no excuse for counsel telling a witness to shut up or a member of the gallery, who I think was the third person told to shut up. But in any event, I have viewed the footage of the incident. And what in fact happened was that Ms. Leroux, who was re-examining Minister Pravin Gordhan, started a question about his struggle history and so on as a precursor to the question of how he felt about being accused of racism against Mr. Tom Moyane. Justice Zondo was in fact the person who started to engage with Ms. Leroux and said, but we've heard this evidence before and we don't need to hear it again. And Ms. Leroux then sought to explain why it was that she wanted to put a question which in part had been covered before. She was still in the process of that explanation when Minister Gordhan tried to resolve the issue by saying, well, he could just say something very brief. And I think it's at that point that Mr. Mpofu then objected to the question of Ms. Leroux. But Ms. Leroux hadn't yet put the question. Ms. Leroux was engaged in an exchange with the chairman of the commission. So the normal situation where a question is being put and opposing counsel want to object to it didn't apply here. If that was the position, then usually you do give the floor to the person who's objecting.